holy cow, if one of these, and I used stronger language back then, but if one of these actually, disappeared from this site, and someone sold it, the highest bidder, to Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the Aum Shinrikyo in Japan. I mean, this is right on the Kazakhstan border. So you're above the Stans, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. I thought any one of these could kill thousands of individuals, So that's why we wrote the classified memo. We said we've got to get on top of this immediately. This is extremely dangerous. And this was in kind of the pre-terrorist era as well. Let me talk briefly about the Chemical Weapons Convention. Big convention. It's the biggest arms control multilateral treaty in the world, rivaled only by the Non-Proliferation Treaty for Nuclear Weapons. It's got 190 state parties now with Syria. Entered into force in '97 when it had the sufficient number of signatories and ratifications. It mandates that it had been negotiated all through the 1980s. The United States and Russia had both agreed in the late 80s that they would unilaterally and reciprocally destroy their stockpiles. So the US and Russia were ready and able and beginning to get rid of their own stockpiles, regardless of the Chemical Weapons Convention. It was finally open for signature in 1993, and everyone joined with the leadership of the Americans and the Russians. It mandates that all the stockpiles have to be destroyed by 2012. So this is 2013, and not all the stockpiles have been destroyed. So there are 3 countries now that are technically in violation of the treaty. The United States, Russia, and Libya. And I'll talk in a minute about, there have been some other violations of it too, but nobody wants to use the V word, the violation word, for this. So if you read through the decision that was made at the OPCW, which I urge you to do if you have interest in this, which we were very involved in, the long decision about what the April 2012 deadline meant was that the Russians, the Americans, and the Libyans would all have to give constant updates on their progress, and they're fully committed to destroying their stockpiles in the quickest time possible. But everyone recognized the fact that they missed the deadline. It also involves not only destruction of stockpiles, but destroying, as you've seen in the prior list, but involves inspection of commercial industry. There are somewhere over 5,000 industry sites around the world that need regular inspection by OPCW inspectors to make sure that chemicals are not diverted. These are industry sites or industries capable of production of dual-use chemicals, like chlorine, like the Germans used in World War I, that are used, in all sorts of industries, sewage treatment and the like, but can also be used as a weapon. So there's ongoing inspections, about 225 right now inspections done per year. I think the OPCW has done a couple thousand inspections now of industry. And then there are 5-year review conferences that we attend. There was just one this past April. There was one in 2003, 2008, 2013 that some of us have spoken at. The United States, we began destruction of the US stockpile in 1990 with a prototype incinerator, one of the world's biggest incinerators, built on Johnson Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. This picture is actually of Umatilla, Oregon, the incinerator in eastern Oregon for the Umatilla stockpile you saw earlier. The United States has been very successful, destroyed somewhere over 25,000 metric tons so far. 7 stockpiles have been closed, totally destroyed. This is somewhere over $25 billion been spent. It's been enormous amounts of money just been poured down this kind of rat hole, but for good purposes. And the United States has about 10 more years to go. The projected schedule now is we won't finish destruction of the last 2 stockpiles till 2023. So the treaty mandates 2012, but we're going to take till about 2023, and I'll come back to that. So the last 2 destruction facilities are under construction still in Kentucky and Colorado. In Russia, Russia was late to come to this. I mean, I was there in '94. We started to help them in '94. We committed a lot of money. We spent well over $1 billion in Russia trying to help them with their destruction program from the United States alone. And other countries have committed in total probably another $1 billion. But they didn't actually get the first facility moving until 2002. And that was a facility at their smallest site, a site called Gorny in the Saratov Oblast. and that's now destroyed. It was about 1,200 tons of lewisite in bulk containers, and the Germans built that for the Russians. So the Russians worked on it, but it was really a German site, and I give credit to the Germans who built that site. They also built the next big lewisite site, which is a place called Kumbaka, and they're also helping the Russians at a place called Pocha, where the Italians were supposed to help, but Italy, in the current circumstances, has given zero to chemical weapons destruction in Russia today. And this is actually a picture of an actual demilitarization operation from Maritkovsky, one of the sites you saw on the map. And what they're doing is, this is an aerial bomb with nerve agent inside it. And they're actually, because it has no explosives actually in the bomb itself, they're actually opening the bomb, physically opening the bomb on the top, measuring how much airspace is in the bomb, and they're pouring in a chemical nutrient that chemically reacts in an exothermic reaction, and basically cooks. They seal it back up again and let it cook for 2 or 3 months, and then basically after 2 or 3 months they go back in, measure and test it, and if it's sufficiently destroyed, it has to be 99.9999% destroyed, 6 nines we talk about, then they move it out for secondary treatment, either to a liquid incinerator or for bioremediation, sort of sewage treatment. The picture on the right is the small stockpile in Albania. And the Albanian story is an interesting one. The Albanians joined the treaty in the mid-1990s as a non-possessor state. And then they, around 2003, I think 2 or 3, they came to the OPSW and said, oops, we think we've found a chemical stockpile. And sure enough, there have been regime change in Albania, from the communist to Western-oriented regime, and the Swiss and the Americans and the Germans went in to investigate this, and it was a little garage up in the mountains outside of the capital, Tirana, and sure enough, it was a mustard agent site, and these were all drums filled with mustard agent that had Chinese markings on them. So obviously they come from China, even though the Albanians, even to this day, don't want to really talk about that too much publicly. And the West immediately helped Albania put security on the site. We're just fortunate that they found it at some point before it was lost. It disappeared to some terrorist group or some other country. You see, South Korea finished in 2008. India finished in 2009. Albania, at the top there, the first bullet, Albania finished in 2007. It was a small incinerator that Germany built for the Albanians. But the interesting story there is that the incinerator broke down in the first day. The first drum they put in the incinerator, the Eisenmann Corporation from Germany, which had done it for the Albanians, built this sort of mini semi-mobile incinerator up in the mountains. Somehow misjudged the temperature and the speed at which this stuff would burn. And they estimated one of these drums in the incinerator would take 19 minutes to burn and self-destruct, and it took 19 seconds. So it essentially exploded in the incinerator when they lit it up and turned it on, and it burned a hole right down through the bottom of the incinerator, which of course presents some safety risk for the workers, to say the least, and shut the whole operation down. And because of that, they couldn't find a welder who was in the world who was licensed to do incineration welding, furnace welding, for another 2 months. So because of that, actually, they were the first to violate deadlines in the treaty. Their deadline was April 2007, and they didn't finish because of this technical glitch until July 2007. So everyone, I think the Americans and the Russians, back in 2007 said, someone else beat us to, the final deadline. And for the Albanians and everybody at that point, 2007 was the deadline. And the Americans and the Russians got a 5-year extension in 2012. So you see Libya there, Iraq, and Syria. The Libyan situation is also interesting that, Muammar Gaddafi declared a stockpile in 2003 or 4 when he joined the Chemical Weapons Convention. And he agreed to move forward and destroy that. And that destruction took place in, I think it was 2010. And then it was interrupted by the Civil War. It actually first broke down. The machinery broke down. Heat exchanger broke, which was Italian. And The Italians have been helping the Libyans. And they couldn't get the heat exchanger back in the middle of the Civil War. It was actually blockaded by the NATO blockade on Gaddafi. And so after the Civil War, they went in, fixed, repaired the machinery, got that stockpile destroyed, but the new regime in Libya in 2011, I guess it was, came in very sheepishly and said, we found a second stockpile that Gaddafi had not declared. So this has some relevance to Syria today too. So this was the first case in which a country and a leader we know intentionally lied and cheated at the OPCW. And the inspectors had not found this hidden stockpile. It's a small stockpile, but it's weaponized mustard agent. And there's now a program, there's ongoing construction here to build a demilitarization facility to destroy that stockpile. So Libya's not quite there. And they've projected that it will take them until 2016 now to destroy that stockpile. But they're fully committed and working towards destroying the stockpile. Iraq is going to be a very tough case because we have these two enormous bunkers in Iraq called Al-Mutana. And they were all sealed up with concrete after the UN inspectors left in the mid-90s. And they just threw everything in there they could find that might have any possible